Gayle Guyardo. Welcome to Bloom, presented by Lifeguard Imaging, a full hour dedicated to your health and wellness. So get ready to bloom. Today we're exploring blue zone living. There are 5 regions in the world known as blue zones, where people tend to live longer, healthier lives compared to the global average. From areas in Japan and Italy to even California, these areas have attracted attention from researchers and health enthusiasts because people who live there make it to 100 years or older with relatively low rates of chronic diseases. Here to help us live life in the blue zone is physician and the author of The Power of 5, the ultimate formula for longevity and remaining youthful, Dr. David Bernstein. Dr. Bernstein, it's great to see you again.
Thanks for inviting me, Gayle. This is one of my favorite subjects to talk about.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I didn't realize this until I was talking to you, that this article was in National Geographic some 50 years ago, but lately it's the buzzword, like living in the blue zones. I think people want to go back to that because we've really become a society that is sick.
You're so right. And in 1973, I saw that article. It was written by Alexander Leaf, and between that and having aged grandparents, I wanted to know all about this, and I made a career of it by being a geriatrician.
So that article inspired you to help so many of your patients. You even wrote a book, the Power of 5, which we just mentioned. And it is interesting because a lot of what you wrote about in your book mirrors what people do living in these regions. And, I think back of my Italian grandmother, Nana Katie, and all the food that we ate was picked from a garden. She hand-selected everything. We cooked from scratch. There are so many things. We had community. There are so many things that help you live longer that people don't even realize.
You're so right. And you know what? You revered your grandma. And as did I. And as did the people in all of those blue zones. Aging was a secret to their success in their communities, and having a community built around reverence for aging was a fantastic component of it.
I remember a while back ago, people, experts, medical experts would talk about aging as though it's a disease. And when you think about aging and disease, they do kind of go hand in hand. If you're not taking care of your body along the way, then you're going to age very differently.
True, because aging is about inflammation in your body. Mm-hmm. And what did they detect in the blue zones recently and in those areas in 1973? They were people who didn't have inflammation. They ate what they grew. They worked the land, so they were hardworking people, and they exercised their heart. They had a community because they were close-knit and didn't get out very often, so that they had this companionship and activity and socialization. They went to bed early because the sun set, and they didn't watch television and Netflix and YouTube and all that sort of thing. So they slept well, and they were meditative people. They were mindful of their community. That they were discovered in 1973. The blue zones that were looked at more recently detected that. And those were the things I saw in my patients who had the healthiest lives, that they lived those lives that way.
Yeah, and our lives have changed so dramatically. I mean, you think of the rates of heart disease, cancer, all of these diseases that are taking our lives and cutting them short. I mean, the mortality rates of Americans continues to drop, so you can see why so many people are interested in this new way of living.
Exactly, and that's why I wrote my book. That's why I talk to my patients. That's what I did my research on, and it all comes down to inflammation. So the things that you just mentioned, heart disease, cancer, and neurodegenerative disease like dementia, they're all related to this inflammatory process that goes on, created by the foods you eat, the stress that we're under, the lack of sleep, the lack of physical activity. And in our society recently, it's a lack of connections, relationships, socialization, and intimacy.
And let's go back to sleep, because this is something else you and I were talking about. I just went to visit one of the top endocrinologists in Tampa Bay, and he's like, I'm looking at your glucose levels, Gayle, and all of your other blood markers don't show that you have unhealthy habits. I don't think you're getting the proper sleep. And he suggested that I get a sleep study. And so even if you don't think that you have sleep apnea, but if you notice even through rings or trackers that something's off with your sleep, this is something we really need to research.
It's true. And it's easy to do because many people have Apple Watches or watches that or rings that will monitor our sleep. So we really can get a view of that, although it doesn't always tell you exactly what happens to your oxygen saturation and how much you obstruct in your airway at night, which is something that the sleep specialists look at. But it is an important component. It's one of my 5, and it's really important that people get good quality sleep.
And last but not least, let's talk about the connectivity of sex. Because every time you're on the show, we do stress this because it is important. People don't realize that your sexual health is directly related to your overall health.
And it's part of the history that I would take with my patients when they came in and their annual visits. Are you sexually active? Is it working? Are you intimate with your companion? If you're single, do you have connections with other people? Are you getting those intimate activities? Because, like I said, the opposite of that is being lonely and isolated, and that's that health hazard that we talked about that didn't exist in those blue zones because they all had this big community and they have reverence for other people.
Hey, what did you say? Loneliness is just the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day?
15 cigarettes a day or being obese. So if people don't want to have those risks, they should avoid the problem of being lonely because that's a health hazard too. And people can do things about it.
All right. Dr. Bernstein, as always, thank you for coming on Bloom.
Been my pleasure. Always a pleasure to be here, Gayle.